People thought he would become the next Marlon Brando. Instead, Tony Franciosa died poor and unremembered. What took place? We now know the bad news. His boss at NBC said he was hard to control, and people who worked with him in Hollywood said he was dangerous. Also, his ex-wife Shelley Winters told everyone about his scandalous affair with Lauren Bacall, which made everything fall apart. It's even worse than the rumors say, from the 10 days he spent in jail to the movie mogul who destroyed his career because he married his daughter. The biggest controversy in Hollywood is finally coming out. Antony George Papaleo was born Tony Franciosa on October 25, 1928 in Little Italy, New York City. From Melie, a small town in southern Italy, his grandparents came to America to find a better life. His mother worked as a seamstress and his father was a builder. It was hard to grow up in that neighborhood, but it was full of Italian customs. It was hard to get by and money was always tight. Tony's parents split up when he was only 1 year old. The job of raising him was done by his mother and aunt. After reflecting, he said that he and his dad never really knew each other. He would go to his dad's place once a week to get a $8 child support check, but they were still not close. That time apart changed him. As a child, you had to deal with problems every day during the Great Depression. His mom worked hard and did everything she could to take care of him. They didn't have much space to live, so every dollar they had was important. It wasn't easy to get around in Manhattan either. There were a lot of fights, and knowing when to stand your ground was important for life. Tony quickly learned. In the end, he said, "I learned how to get in the first punch as a child." He kept that tough, street-smart attitude all his life. Even though things were hard, his Italian background gave him a strong sense of who he was. Things were different in Little Italy. Families stuck together, customs were kept alive, and people were always proud of their roots even if they didn't have much. He didn't fully understand how that past had changed him at the time. It helped him understand how other people felt, which made his performance seem more real. Once Tony finished high school, he worked at any job he could find. He was a cook, a ship's waiter, a day worker, and a welder before that. He learned how to work hard and stay alive at each job. He worked with people from all walks of life and saw how hard it was for them to make a living. Later, that experience would help him make the working class people he played seem more real. When I was 18, something strange happened. He was asked by a friend to go to the YMCA for free dance classes. While he was there, he came across an audition for Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. He had never thought about becoming an actor before. He chose to give it a try out of interest. He was shocked when he got a small part. Everything changed at that time. He became really interested in acting. He first studied with Joseph Giggler and then got a grant to go to the New York City Drama Workshop. Lee Strasberg taught him how to be an actress at the famous school, and he worked with groups like the Cherry Lane Theater. He learned from some of the best in the game while working with people like B. Arthur, who would become stars. He wasn't just another actor with big dreams. He had a fire in him that made people pay attention. Changing his name was one of the most important things he did. He chose to go by his mother's given name, Franciosa, instead of his real name, Antony Papaleo. It was a way to recognize what she had done. She did everything she could to raise him by herself, and he wanted to honor her. He also got a new start in Hollywood. Typecasting could happen if your name sounds like a racial group. Franciosa kept his roots living and also made new opportunities possible. He first became an actor when he joined the Cherry Lane Theater group in Greenwich Village in 1948. Off-Broadway theater was known for trying new things with shows that didn't follow the usual plot. Rising stars like B. Arthur, Kim Stanley, and Michael Godzo got better there. Working in this creative place gave Franciosa the chance to see daring and unusual performances that changed the way he acts. By 1950, his hard work had won him a spot at the Actors School, which was one of the best places for actors to learn. Some of the biggest names in the business learned method acting from Lee Strasberg, who ran the school. Franciosa learned his craft with Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Ben Gazzara. Because of how stressful it was, he had to dig deep into his feelings, which would become one of his signature skills. He learned how to give every part a real feel by giving them a raw energy. His first show on Broadway was End as a Man, which was in 1953 and was about cheating at a military school in the South. The show opened off-Broadway on September 15th at Theatre Dice and then moved to Broadway on October 14th. Franciosa played the part of Private George Pendleton, who was both stubborn and weak. Some reviewers said that his act stood out and that he was a rising star. As the lead in the play Ben Gazzara, the two of them brought a new level of energy to the stage. It was this part that made Franciosa famous and showed that he could play complicated personalities. A Hatful of Rain, which came out in 1955, was his biggest hit. At the time, the play dealt with drug abuse, which wasn't often seen in theater. Franciosa played Polo Pope, a guy who was having a hard time helping his addicted brother Johnny, who was a war hero. Johnny was played by Ben Gazzara, and Celia, Johnny's wife, was played by Shelley Winters. The play, which was written by Michael V. Gazzo, opened at the Lyceum Theatre on November 9th and ran for 398 shows. Franciosa gave a strong performance that showed the anger and love of a brother who was trying to keep his family together. He was nominated for a Tony Award for his work, which cemented his status as one of the most intense acts of his time. It was seen in Hollywood. He played Polo Pope again in the 1957 movie version of A Hatful of Rain, which was directed by Fred Zinnemann. Some changes were made to the group. Don Murray took over as Johnny from Ben Gazzara, and Eva Marie Saint played Shelley Winters' part. As close as possible to the play, the movie kept the real feeling that made the play a hit on Broadway. At the Venice Film Festival, Franciosa won the Volpi Cup for Best Actor for his powerful performance. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor that same year. It was the only mention he would receive in his career. The movie stood out because it was honest about addiction and how it affects families, which wasn't always the case in Hollywood. The movie A Hatful of Rain made movies seem more real. Some critics said Franciosa did a great job of showing Polo's inner struggle without making him seem too dramatic. The film was called a striking and disturbing work by Bosley Crowther of the New York Times and a half-realm, half-nightmare by the Los Angeles Times. The first movie Tony Franciosa was in Hollywood was This Could Be the Night, a comedy drama directed by Robert Wise in 1957. He was Tony Armady, the boss of a nightclub who was charming but hard to guess. Based on short stories by Cornelia Baird Gross, the movie stars Gene Simmons and Paul Douglas. Franciosa gave a great show. He was naturally charming, and his streetwise vibe set him apart from other up-and-coming stars. Some people found it interesting that he could be both funny and serious at the same time. In the same year, he played a much more important part in Elia Kazan's A Face in the Crowd. The movie was about how the media can be dangerous and how powerful it can be. In the major role, Andy Griffith played Lonesome Rhodes, a wanderer who became a TV star. However, Franciosa played Mel Miller, a writer who knew what was really going on. Miller finally told the truth about Rhodes, which brought him down in the end. Griffith's act is famous, but Franciosa showed that he could be as good as Hollywood's best. These two movies, which came out the same year, showed how adaptable he was. Along with Marlon Brando and James Dean, he was part of the new breed of players coming out of the actor's studio. After a great start, Franciosa kept showing what he could do. In 1957, he played the lead role in George Cukor's Wild as the Wind. It was he who played Ben, a young ranch hand who fell in love with Anna Magnani's character even though she was married to Gino, played by Anthony Quinn. The movie showed a strong love story with anger and treachery set in the harsh Nevada environment. Franciosa and Magnani got along great, and his performance showed that he could hold his own against more experienced players. In 1958, he worked on Martin Ritt's The Long Hot Summer. The movie stars Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, and Orson Welles and was based on stories by William Faulkner. Franciosa played Jody Varner, Will Varner's Wells' nervous son. Will Varner is a powerful businessman. Jody had a hard time getting his dad's approval, and he thought that Paul Newman's confident drifter Ben Quick was more interesting than him. Franciosa made Jodes want to give up seem real. The movie was a big hit, and it helped Ritz's career get back on track after Hollywood had banned him. Soon after, in The Naked Maja, which was set in the past and about the famous Spanish artist Francisco Goya and his passionate love, Franciosa played Goya. While they were waiting, Franciosa was paid $250,000, which was a huge sum at the time for her work on Ava Gardner's Duchess of Alba. The movie didn't do well at the box office when it finally came out, but his role as Goya showed that he could play complicated characters. Franciosa gave one of his most powerful performances ever in 1959, directed by Joseph Anthony. The movie was about an actor named Sam Lawson who was trying to make it in Hollywood during the McCarthy era. The part was intense and showed the struggles and sacrifices of someone trying to get ahead in a tough business. He was in the movie with Dean Martin and Shirley MacLaine, but Franciosa really stole the show. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama for his role. Even though he was only 31, he was already one of Hollywood's best leading men. He was also nominated for 3 Academy Awards for Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design. But Franciosa's honest and moving performance was what people remembered most. Franciosa was known for making unhappy and moody characters seem real to the audience. One great example is his part in A Hatful of Rain, 1957. Polo Pope was played by him. Polo Pope was a loving but angry brother who was trying to help his addicted sister beat heroin. The movie got him a nod for an Academy Award for Best Actor because it was one of his most powerful roles. His anger often got in the way, but Tony Franciosa had the kind of skills that would have made him a Hollywood hero. He often got into fights with directors, producers, and co-stars. When things didn't go his way, he often sulked in his dressing room. He wouldn't just fight with the director if he didn't agree with them, he would refuse to do what they said. It wasn't just a problem, sometimes it became part of his image. Franciosa worked with Gene Barry and Robert Stack on the NBC show The Name of the Game, which ran from 1968 to 1971. The show went well, but it was hard to work with him. Because he got angry so often, Universal Pictures gave up on the show after the second season. They fired him. Over time, Franciosa said he had been treated badly, but the damage had already been done. He was called tough by Hollywood. He lost his anger over more than just disagreements. He saw a different side of him on the set of All Man Could Get Killed, 1966. It was dangerous for the stunt workers because Franciosa didn't hold back during fight scenes. Garner jumped in because things were getting too bad. Both of them got physical with each other. These kinds of things made it harder for Franciosa to get steady work. He was having a hard time getting big parts by the late 1960s. It was getting harder for him to get work in Hollywood, so he had to do movies in Europe to stay current. In an interview in 1996, Franciosa said he wasn't ready for fame when it happened. He said he wasn't grown enough and hadn't been able to handle the stress well, but it was too late. The big chances were gone for good. He had trouble off the set too. Franciosa got in trouble with the cops in April 1957 because of his bad temper. He was becoming famous at the time after being nominated for an Oscar for his role. In that month, he fought with a cameraman outside of a Hollywood event. The press had been following him around, and when one reporter got too close, Franciosa lost it and punched the man in public. He lost more than just bad news that day. He was given a 10-day jail sentence for abuse and charged with it. Franciosa got big parts even after she got out of jail. He was in Wild as the Wind in 1957 and The Long Hot Summer in 1958, but the press never forgot what happened, and stories about his anger kept going around. Studios began to fear that he was too unreliable. He was no longer just a great actor with a strong personality, he was a danger. And then there was another delay. Franciosa married Judy Balaban in 1961.
Judy is the daughter of Barney Balaban, who was head of Paramount Pictures. This should have been a way to get into the cool crowd in Hollywood. Instead, it might have cost him his job. Judy's autobiography, Bridesmaids, says that her father was very angry about the wedding. Some people think he used his power to keep Franciosa from getting big parts. Frankie had been getting better before they got married. He had just won a Golden Globe for his work in 1959 and was ready to be a main man, but his career began to fall apart after 1961. Not many high-profile jobs opened up. He worked on smaller projects and played parts abroad by the middle of the 1960s. Some people who work in the business thought Barney Balaban had something to do with it. In later talks, Franciosa hinted that Hollywood leaders had turned their backs on him, but he never said for sure. His fall wasn't caused by just one mistake. It was a mix of bad choices, bad press, and bad relationships. It's not always enough to be talented in Hollywood. To be an actor, you need to know the right people, have a good image, and know how to get around the system. Even though the business didn't like Franciosa, she still got some big parts. He played the lead role in George Roy Hill's 1962 movie Period of Adjustment. The movie, which was based on a Tennessee Williams play, was a mix of comedy and drama that showed how hard it is for two married couples. Franciosa played Ralph Bates, an unhappy husband who was torn between family problems and what society expects of him. He got to show off his comedic skills in this movie, which was a nice change from the serious parts he was usually known for. Jane Fonda, who played his co-star, was nominated for a Golden Globe for her role. Franciosa didn't have as much luck. Period of Adjustment wasn't a failure, but it didn't change how Hollywood saw him either. His reputation had already kept him from getting some jobs. By the middle of the 1960s, it was getting harder to get parts in movies. Franciosa chose to try TV in the hopes of starting over. He played the lead role in the 1964 ABC show Valentine's Day. He was Valentine Farrow, a smooth-talking publishing executive who had to balance love and work. The show had a great supporting cast, and Jack Sue was great as his faithful servant and poker partner. It gave Franciosa a chance to show off his charm and funny timing, which he hadn't really done in movies before. But the show never found its audience, even though the writing was funny and the actors were good. It was only on for one season. It was another blow when that was canceled. Franciosa was still looking for a job that would give him security. He got the part of Jeff Dillon on NBC's The Name of the Game in 1968. That show was different from everything else on TV. It had 3 different main personalities and each had their own story. Franciosa played a reporter for People magazine who did investigations. Gene Barry played a strong company head in publishing, and Robert Stack played a senior editor who fights crime and corruption. Each episode was about a different one of them, which made the show interesting and surprising, which kept people watching. Jeff Dillon, the character played by Franciosa, was brave and driven. He was a reporter who wouldn't give up even if it meant breaking the rules of ethics. His shows were about important problems at the time, like government scandals, business corruption, and fair treatment of everyone. Dillon was one of the most interesting people on the show because of how energetic he was on stage. The first episode aired on September 20, 1968, and there were 76 shows in all 3 seasons. People really liked it, and reviewers said it was well made and had stories that were relevant. It became one of NBC's best series while it was on, and Franciosa was a big part of that. Things were different off-screen, though. Many people said that Franciosa was hard to work with. He often got into fights with directors and producers on set because of his bad mood. He wouldn't leave his dressing room some days if he thought someone was being rude to him. In 1970, Universal Pictures asked him to take a pay cut because they were short on money. This was one of their biggest disagreements. He said no. As things got worse, there were heated arguments, and the company ultimately chose to fire him. After 2 seasons, they said it was because of the actor's strange behavior. In the end, Franciosa said that he had been mistreated and that the company was looking for a reason to fire him. The Name of the Game went on for another season after he left, with guest stars like Robert Wagner and Darren McGavin to fill, but many fans said the show wasn't the same without him. Some of its edge was lost. His firing was a turning point and the show never got back to normal after that. Franciosa did other work after that, but none of it was as successful as the first one. In 1972 he played the lead role in the sci-fi show Search, which was about private detectives who use high-tech tools. The idea behind it was good, but the show only ran for one season with 23 episodes. A detective show based on Donald Hamilton's spy books gave him his first major part in 1975. It was called Matt Helm. The show ran from September 20th, 1975 to January 3rd, 1976, but after only 13 episodes it was scrapped. In 1984 he had his last big TV part in Aaron Spelling's ABC soap Finder of Lost Loves. He played Carrie Maxwell, a private detective who helped people get back in touch with ex-lovers. Though it had famous guests and Dionne Warwick singing the theme song, the show didn't really get people to watch. It had 23 shows in its first season before it was ended. Franciosa worked hard all the time, but his career never again hit the heights it did with The Name of the Game. It was clear that he was talented, but because of his image it was hard for him to get long-term jobs. He didn't wait for calls that might never come, so he did something brave. He left the USS and became an actor in European movies, where he found a new life. The change didn't bring him back to fame in Hollywood, but it did give him steady work and the chance to play parts that fit his heavy style. In 1980 he played the lead role in Alberto Tuata's Italian film The Cricket Lala. He played the sad love interest Annibale Murage, who was in a relationship with Wilma Mullenvary, who used to be a singer but now works as a prostitute. Verna Lisi won a lot of praise in Italy for her role, but Franciosa was just as strong in the part. Love and sorrow dragged him down and he tried hard to run away from a life full. The movie was set in Italy after World War II and looked at love, deception and desperation. It wasn't seen by many people outside of Italy, but it got good reviews there. In 1982 Franciosa played the lead role in Tenerebbe, a thriller by Dario Argento. After the success of his 1977 supernatural horror movie Suspiria, Argento returned to the giallo style with this movie. Franciosa played Peter Neal, an American mystery writer who comes to Rome to promote his newest book. But as soon as he gets there, a killer starts using his book as a model for real deaths. He was able to show both charm and anxiety in the part, as his character tried to find the truth while also becoming a suspect. People who saw the movie loved it because it had great pictures and a lot of psychological depth. The story twists were made more interesting by Franciosa's acting, which gave his character depth and made them seem unpredictable. Even though he had some great parts in Europe, he never became as famous as he was in the US. That he worked on movies that were well liked but not popular enough to make him famous all over again. His intense, emotional and often random acting style put him in a certain category, but it made him great at playing complicated roles. He played Alio Brentani, a man who is afraid and doubts himself, in the 1962 movie Silita Careless. People liked how honest and emotional he was in his acting, but the character's problems made him hard for most people to connect to. But the projects he was in weren't big enough to bring him back into the Hollywood spotlight. His energy made horror movies like Web of the Spider 1971 stand out. His fights with directors and producers in the past followed him. American companies were afraid to work with him again, even though he had worked with well-known European directors. Hollywood had moved on by the end of the 1980s. People in European films still looked up to him, but he was no longer a big star. Tony Franciosa's love life was just as exciting as the movies he was in. He had been married 4 times, so he knew all about love, trouble and gossip. His romance with actress Shelley Winters was the most well-known. They got married on May 4, 1957 after meeting on the set of A Hat Full of Rain. There was no denying their energy, but they were also very unstable. Their 3-year marriage was full of love fights and public drama that was in the news almost as often as their movies. Later, Winters said that their relationship was a mix of fun and fights, big emotion and low comedy. But there were bigger problems going on underneath all the fun. There was less of a link between them because of Franciosa's bad mood and affairs. One connection he was said to have had with Lauren Bacall became the talk of Hollywood. It is said that Bacall called Winters and said that Franciosa was late for a date with her. It sounds like something out of a movie. The women fought with each other, which made things even worse in their marriage. Sometimes Winters would joke that Franciosa would have been captain of the team if sex were enough. Franciosa's second marriage was just as hard. He married Judy Balaban in 1961. Judy was the daughter of Barney Balaban, the powerful head of Paramount Pictures. It looked like a perfect fit on paper, but Judy's father wasn't happy about it. There were rumors that Barney Balaban tried to ruin Franciosa's career as a way to punish him for marrying his daughter. No matter if it was true or not, Franciosa's once promising rise in Hollywood slowed down a lot while they were married. Even though he won a Golden Globe for his role in Career 1959, he stopped getting many big offers. Some people in the business said that Balaban had used his power to keep the star from getting jobs. They had a daughter named Nina, but they were no longer married by 1967. Franciosa never said in public if Balaban was to blame for his job problems, but it was hard to miss how bad he was doing during that time. One thing that his story did was tell people that personal relationships can help or hurt a Hollywood career. By the time he married Rita Thiel in 1970, Franciosa wanted to be stable. The German model turned out to be a stable person in his life. His last episode of The Name of the Game aired on November 27, 1970, the day they got married. He was fired from the show because of his crazy behavior, which had been a problem for him for a long time. Rita wasn't scared though. She was there for him when he was having a hard time. She pushed him to get help for his anger issues and taught him how to deal with the mood swings that had hurt previous relationships. She once said he was never taught how to keep his cool. I changed him a lot. We still fight sometimes, but I can scream back at him. Franciosa was married to him for the rest of her life. Along with their spouse, they had 2 sons. Christopher became an actor like his father did, and Marco became an organic farmer. Franciosa seemed to find some peace in his later years, even though he had been through a lot in his life. Then there was one last turn of events. Summer Winters died on January 14, 2006. She was 85 years old. After only 5 days, on January 19, Franciosa passed away after having a stroke. Because they died so soon after each other, people are interested in their fiery past again. Even though they were only married for 3 years, their lives would always be connected. Both went to the acting school and built their careers on intense dramatic roles. They were also known in Hollywood for being passionate and unreliable. Winters won 2 Academy Awards, and Franciosa was praised for what he did in movies like Career and A Hat Full of Rain.